Welcome, leaders, teams, and those ready to take charge of their energy. It's Kelly Buboltz, your guide in workforce energy management. Burnout is not just a buzzword, it's a symptom of deeper root cause stressors. We're here to stop waiting for the change and start leading it. It's time to reclaim our energy and lead our days with intention and purpose. Isn't it interesting when you begin talking about burnout, talking about stress, and then you mention your profession, and the response is met with, "Oh, yeah, I could see that." Well, that's what often came up when I told people that I worked in HR, human resources. And after 15 years in that hustle, I eventually hit burnout physical collapse. But then I actually continued in HR on a part-time basis as I grew my company. And I found out there is a way that you can manage this stress with just a few micro steps throughout your week to make sure that you're honoring your energy and not just continually draining it. And what I found is you can't continue building thriving teams if you can't even thrive yourself. You just show up giving all this energy that you no longer have. Now, recent reports show that HR burnout rates are higher than ever. Not just from workload, but from morale fatigue and emotional labor, and being that buffer between employees and the organization. And in a recent SAGE survey, 81% of HR leaders report feeling burnt out, and 95% of them feel overwhelmed by workload and stress. 95% of HR people feel overwhelmed by workload and stress. That is a significant number. So let's talk about why this is happening, what to watch for, and a few steps you can take today to protect your energy before burnout takes over and you end up just like me. Now, I thought my story was a little different, that I was fighting the statistics of being another HR professional, leaving the job, leaving that career path. And so I stayed and I grinded and I hustled, and it ended up almost giving me a heart attack by age 35. And what I found out when I started talking about burnout is many HR people are in this same spot. Not wanting to be another statistic of someone who leaves this profession, but in a profession that you constantly get put in the middle and never have time for yourself. How do you do that? How do you balance it all? How do you integrate a work-life balance in which you don't go home from work and just feel completely drained? And why this is unique is because it's a resource for humans. So it will always be a giver. It will always be a service support type of role in organizations. And HR isn't just policy and paperwork. It's that emotional labor, that invisible work that no one really understands unless they work in HR. I'm talking about the buffering, holding that space for everyone else's problems, making sure everyone's heard. That takes a lot of energy out of you. That morale misalignment where you might have to enforce a policy, you might have to do something for the good of the company, the good of the team, and it might go against your personal values. There's no clear switch off. This is crisis mode, and it can become chronic. You can have days after days, weeks turn into months where you're putting out fire after fire and still getting the regular day-to-day job done. I would hit this in Q4 of every year where we would be doing benefits, we would be working on workforce strategy, we would be cleaning up workforce strategy of the current year, we would be dealing with turnover, we would be dealing with disciplinary employees, and then we would have all the corporate requests on top of that coming up for the new strategic year. It was insanity. There was no off time. And to even think about taking a half day off to reset yourself, nope, there would be zero time for that. And you would be cleaning up such a mess when you got back that it wasn't even worth taking the time off. So you just grind through it. Well, now picture that quarter turning into another quarter. Do you see where the chronic nature comes in? The other contributing factors are lack of appreciation. People assume HR is the fun police, that they can plan the party as if they have nothing else going on. I found myself going in HR because I'm bubbly. I love working with people. I love seeing their behaviors. I love coaching and seeing what their potential is. But then HR became kind of a dumping zone that when others don't want to address conflict and now things get real bad, now HR has to clean up. But then they also has to turn around and throw this fantastic celebration party because we hit our metrics. That lack of appreciation for not only the cleanup, but all the extra ads that get dumped in your desk, it starts to add up. The decision fatigue, navigating gray areas constantly. I not only had a regular workforce, but I also had a union labor force that I was negotiating, having conversations with, trying to keep the peace on both sides. And there was a lot of gray. Certainly we had a contract and policies and procedures to follow, but also they're people. Not everyone and every situation will be the same. So navigating those gray areas of not only what is the impact short term right now, but long term in the future can cause that decision fatigue, that mental drain. And then the loneliness. In confidentiality, when people tell you things, when you're dealing with medical situations with employees, when you're dealing with their family situations, such as life events like grief or losing someone and divorce, that's all confidential. And so that can limit not only who you can talk to about this, but also what other people are saying about this employee and the information that they don't have. And because it's confidential, you cannot share. So you know the information that would probably bring some perspective to this, and you have to sit with it. It's very lonely in HR. The other thing that I found out early in my career was you had to be careful who you hang out with, who you're friends with. For example, early on in my career, in my early 20s, I actually had a grievance go all the way to court with the union because they thought I was favoring an employee because I was in their bowling team. I was in their bowling league with them. And the ironic thing about this is I didn't bowl at all, but it's this rumor mill, this gossip mill that took flight of its own. And so I just stopped talking to people all in general because I was so afraid because someone perceived a conversation or a hangout or a luncheon, something more than it ever would be. And so you just kind of keep to yourself. You keep your problems to yourself. You keep your struggles to yourself. It really stands true that there is no HR for HR because who do you talk to when things aren't great at home? Who do you talk to when you're having a troubled employee? Because if you go to your boss, does it show that you can't do your job, that you can't handle when there's conflict? There's all these things to navigate that can begin to isolate you. So let's link these energy drainers. These lead to cognitive fatigue, emotional depletion, and identity loss. I act very differently in my HR role than I do at home. I'm fun, I'm silly, I go with the flow, but in HR, you have to be a little bit more standardized, consistent. And sometimes you have to be the bad guy, and that is not me. I empower people. I love to lift them up. But in order to run a business from an HR side and make sure that you're consistent, sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes you have to let people go. Sometimes you have to separate the bad apples, even if they had a little bit of potential, because they become a poison. So signs that you're in this burnout zone, you're starting to feel resentment even before the workday starts. I used to sit in my car just stewing in resentment. People would be waving good morning and I would just be swearing behind my dashboard. I didn't even want to go in anymore. So that resentment starts building up. You start to feel numb about people's problems, that empathy fatigue. After the fifth problem brought to you that day, you're kind of like, why try? Another day, right? Another Monday. Another sign that you might be in this burnout zone is you're spending your off time dreading the next work crisis, dreading checking your email, dreading going in the next day. Those Sunday scaries, but it's almost every night because what envelope's going to be on my desk in the morning, or that upside down piece of paper that has a resignation notice, or that next complaint that's in your email when you open up, or that call that's coming in at 3 a.m. about a safety issue, right? You're dreading just any piece of work, whether it's email going in or those calls. And then you begin to just detach from your role and the identity of it. And that starts leading to sleep issues and those health flare-ups. I had my gut issues and my hair started falling out. But in other HR people that I've worked with, they might have displaced emotion like anger towards their family, that word vomit when you get home from work, and that irritability is starting to rise. So let's talk about how we're going to, in HR, recover our energy and prevent this burnout, because once I went into my part-time HR role, plus I was building my business, a lot of hours between both, I start to see energy regain because I was practicing these 4 things. And I want to share them with you because I want my HR peers to succeed. I want my HR peers to thrive because people and teams need human resources because they're their voice. The strategy for businesses is through the workforce. So HR is a key player to success and results and growth. So let's go through these 4. The first one is audit your energy. I want you to use this 4-part energy compass. And we go through this often in the guided journal to stress management called the Unseen Trail. And the 4 areas are cognitive, so that brain and mental function, emotional, how are we identifying our emotions, releasing our emotions? Physical, how are we treating our body, fueling our body, moving our body to release that stress? And then what are the relationship and environmental factors involved in how we react and interact with those? And in this energy audit, what we're going to do is what tasks give you energy and what drains it. And what I found out when I was doing this is there's a lot of functions within HR that I did not enjoy. Some of them you have to do, like separating an employee, totally stinks. But then there's some that were complete drainers. Because I was in a more strategic role, sometimes those repetitive phone interviews would just drain my energy. I love doing phone interviews. I love interacting with candidates. I learn a lot about what's going on in the labor market. But when you do that for 40 hours straight, weeks on end, it can become draining. So what I found out, it wasn't so much the recruitment, it was the variety of recruitment with my other tasks. And that was the difference between energy and the drain of it. So have you really taken a look at your role lately to audit that energy, the tasks that give you energy and the ones that drain it? And what parts of it drain it? Because it might not be the entire function of it. It might just be you need to do it less. You can find out maybe your role looks different these days and propose a new solution. Or you can protect when you have all those drainers that you're not pushing yourself into energizer type of activities when your mood's just not there. Now, the second one is redesigning micro boundaries. So that means defining when work stops. It's got to be a ritual. It's got to be a routine. I worked all the time. We were 24/7 operation, 3 plants. I was a safety contact. It was constant. And so eventually I had to talk about when does work stop and when do you actually contact me, which is a complete emergency. You need to contact HR at this point. Everything else could be an email and we can talk about it when I get into my next shift. So internally, you need to establish this boundary. No one else will do this for you. Micro boundary means when do you work and when do you not? That might mean your laptop stays in your car or away from where you usually hang out. That might mean notifications and work emails turn off. All these things are capable within email systems now that you can set this up to go silent. And then externally, make sure that others know these expectations. Do you have buffers after your meeting slots? Or do you have meeting spillover where you just go one thing to the next thing to the next thing all day long? And then at the end of the day, you're like, well, I'll sign on tonight to catch up on my actual work. You need to be able to push back on unrealistic tasks, asks, requests. I think it's perfectly fine these days to state, I am trying to establish micro boundaries to manage my energy so I can show up both here and at home. I have not met a person yet since I've started saying that doesn't respect that ask. So when you set the expectations and you consistently live by those expectations, you start to see those boundaries being honored and your energy return. Now, the third one is rebuild your support circle. Find safe spaces for you. And that might mean not within your organization. I found I couldn't talk to anyone about my real issues in HR within my organization because who would they tell? Because of fear that they might tell someone else within our organization. So I joined an HR group, and there's all different HR groups. There's SHRMs, there's HR associations, there's industry-specific associations, which I actually found very helpful as a female in a male-dominant industry of manufacturing. I joined some women in manufacturing groups, and regardless if they're in HR or not, we all were hitting the same hurdles with boundaries, with conflict, with conversations. So that was super helpful to be part of an industry-specific group. Do you have a mentor? And this one could be within your organization, or it could be outside of your organization. And then finding maybe a third-party coach or a non-work therapist. I did use my EAP, the Employee Assistance Program therapist, and it was kind of a blanket program that I could just Google. And so I found a therapist that was more aligned with where I wanted to go, which was more of an energy therapist, a more spiritual therapist, where we could figure out what is Kelly hanging on to and what does Kelly need to let go? What are the conversations that Kelly needs to have? It was just super refreshing because it wasn't family, friends, or coworkers. They're going to kind of buffer the situation because they want to support you. I needed someone with clear eyes who doesn't know the people I'm talking about to bring that unbiased view. Now, I think an important thing to realize as you rebuild your support circle is you manage the work culture in your organization, but who helps you manage yours? And creating that support circle that fits you is your culture. And that's your support through the hard times, through the good times, and they get it. So rebuilding that support circle is going to be important. The fourth one I want to talk about is realigning your role and values. Review what drew you to human resources in the first place, and are you still in alignment with your why? Because I see some HR people who have, their role has evolved so much, that role creep, that they're doing things they never went into HR to do, or they're doing 6 jobs and they no longer can handle it. So reviewing why you went into HR and getting back to that might mean rescoping your job description. It might mean delegating to other people in your team. It might mean getting an intern for some of that work that they would love to do and learn, but it's dragging you down. Again, those drainers. When you audit your energy, when you set those micro boundaries and you practice them, when you rebuild your support circle for what you need and you realign your roles and values, you start to see that HR can be what you went into it for. You can't be the emotional glue of the company, the voice of the employees, if you're unraveling every day. So this week, I want you to take a 5-minute energy inventory. And where can you rebalance? Bring a topic up in your HR circles and start to normalize the conversation. And continue to explore the support that's available. Subscribe for upcoming episodes or grab up that guided journal to stress management to go deeper in protecting your energy through these transitions and crises and change. And when you're feeling doubt that you feel like the only one that's in this burnout state, I want you to know from one burnt out HR person to another, you're not alone. Today's step matters. It's in the micro moments that real change begins. Managing your energy isn't about shame, blame, or disrupting your lifestyle. It's about the small, intentional choices to reclaim that natural energy. If this episode hit the mark for you, share with others. This journey doesn't have to be lost and lonely, but exciting and full of new paths. See you back here to continue the adventure.